This story was sent in by our friend on Reddit, Jimmy Donaldson. We were having a sleepover at one of my friend's houses to celebrate our last year of high school coming to an end. My friend, who I will call Joe, lived at the end of the street. His parents were at work and wouldn't come home until 3 a.m. I got there around 5. My friends and I played games and went to the pool. My friend Tony arrived at 7. When we answered the door, he seemed shaken and pissed off. He said that he saw someone in the bushes looking at him. It scared him, but he thought it was one of us pulling a prank on him. We thought he was joking, but he was being dead serious. Me and my friend Jim went searching in the bushes near the driveway. What we saw shook us to the core. We found a bloody knife and 2 shotgun shells. We ran back inside telling the others what we had found. They didn't believe us, so Jim ran back to grab the stuff and show them. 1 minute later, we heard screaming. All of us ran to the bushes to see Jim with a knife jammed in his back, along with deep cuts around his throat and face. We all ran back inside. Joe tried to call the police, but due to a nearby car accident, the police wouldn't come for 15 minutes. The operator told us to stay put and not to exit the house. We all grabbed a knife from the kitchen, along with a prop gun that could scare people off. We were all waiting for the police to get here, until my friend James saw someone in the backyard. As we all looked down from the balcony overlooking our backyard, we could see a man holding a knife, or a machete. He was just standing there. We slowly backed away from the balcony and ran towards the front door, disregarding the operator's advice. But when we got to the door, we could see another man standing there holding a shotgun. We all stood there frozen until one of my friends recommended we hide downstairs, but it was too close to the guy in the backyard, but it was our only chance. We ran downstairs to the music room and hid there. 1 minute later, we heard a huge blast. One of the guys used his shotgun to break into the house. We were all scared. Yeah, we had knives, but we were only 18 and they had a gun. 2 minutes later, we could hear the 2 guys walking down the stairs to our area. My friend Joe decided to stand by the door and attack anyone who comes in. Then the guy with the shotgun walks in. Joe tackles him to the ground and stabs him in the throat. The man with the knife stabs Joe in the stomach. While he was distracted, we all ran out of the house to another person's house. Then the police finally arrived and took both Jim and Joe to the hospital. Joe managed to recover, while Jim sadly died. We later found out that these guys were part of some cult and were planning on killing us, so they could sacrifice us to their so-called God. It's been a while since I have seen Joe, but I hope that he is doing well. The story was sent in by our friend on Reddit, Chantal Gracie. So, when I was 5 or 6 years old, I was invited to a sleepover for a girl's birthday. Let's call her Molly. I was severely bullied. I was being called fat, weird, and also my love for horses was mocked. Horses were an obsession of mine. It later turned out I had autism. I was diagnosed at 21 years old, along with ADHD, and that came as no surprise. I also have PTSD, depression, and more of that. I lived in an abusive home where there was no support whatsoever, and emotional abuse was the norm. Later on, I also got hit by my father. But that's not a story for now. Anyway, I wanted to go to the sleepover because I fell, time and time again, for the sort of invite to become part of the group. This was one of those times. We kind of had fun at first, but then some girls like to tell some scary stories. I'm now a fan of podcasts about scary stories, but back then I was easily spooked. This night was no different. The time came to put out the lights and get some sleep. Of course, that didn't happen. Then Anna, my bully, starts trying to scare the others. She was talking about a scary man in a brown coat, covered in blood and an axe in his hand, standing outside the window. As expected, I was really scared and I wanted to leave, but I also didn't want to be the scaredy cat. I tried my best to keep calm, but the thing was, no one knew I actually saw that man standing out there. I didn't tell anyone, but of course I was scared as hell. I wanted to change the subject, but no one listened to me. I was ignored for the most part. I looked through the tiny gap between the curtains and I still saw the man. All the girls were laughing and saying they didn't see anyone. I still saw him, just standing there, not making a move. I was so scared, but I didn't cry. I texted my parents, but they were asleep. Then I decided to call them to come pick me up. They were mad as I expected. I was afraid to anger them, but I was too afraid of the creepy man, and seeing him was worse than being yelled at by my parents. We went home and they put me to bed. I was still scared but fell asleep pretty fast. Now, later on in life, I'm on various meds for my mental health. One of those being an antipsychotic medication. I don't have a diagnosis for the hallucinations. I have to go through some intense trauma therapy. The main thing now is the self-harming I did. It's a trauma response, but in itself was also after cutting for years. I also started burning myself and giving myself third-degree burns. I eventually had a skin graft done on my arms. So after the sleepover, my hallucinations gradually got worse and I started hearing voices. It can be scary, but I'm somehow used to it. I didn't go for a sleepover in many years as I was too afraid of someone finding out about me seeing things. I was also so ashamed that I mentioned it in therapy after 12 years. The reason I finally mentioned it was because it got so out of hand I couldn't function. I was put in a psych ward and got started on antipsychotics. It did get better to my relief, but it was only the first of so many times I've been admitted to a psych ward. But that's another story for another day. Thinking back, I'm still not sure if it was my first hallucination or that man was real. It felt so real to me. Hallucinations can be so frightening. I hope one day life will get easier, and I hope to never see that man again. Hello everyone, my name is Olivia. I was a 15-year-old girl at the time of this story. It was close to Halloween. Me and my friend Heather wanted to have a sleepover because we hadn't had one in a while, so why not, right? Now we live in Canada. So many bad things weren't usually common, especially where we lived. It was around 11:30 at night, and me and Heather were up watching movies and talking about boys. My parents weren't home because they were both very busy people who would always be either at work or sleeping at home. I loved them so much because I knew everything they've been doing was so that I could have a good life. Anyways, they were supposed to be gone until 3 a.m. They both were doctors, so they had the late night shifts. They allowed me to have a friend over since they didn't want me to be home alone that late. Me and Heather were having a great time watching this movie that I can't remember the name of. It was amazing. Then, around 12, we heard a knock at the door. I got a little scared, but I thought it was my parents getting home early from a shift. So me and Heather walked towards the door to let them in. Then, something in my brain told me not to open it. Instead, I looked through the keyhole before opening the door. I looked through the peephole. Then I saw nothing. No, I could see, quite literally, nothing. It was all black. I was confused because usually I could see my front porch. Then out of nowhere, I could see my front porch. I was so confused and a little scared at the same time. Then chills went down my spine as Heather whispered in my ear. She said, "There's a man on the front porch. It's not your dad." I got scared. I don't do good in these situations since I was never really prone to them my entire life. I realized the reason I couldn't see my front porch through the peephole was because there was someone standing right in front of it. I decided to check through the peephole again to see if the man had moved, since looking through the window was far too risky. I looked through the peephole, then jumped back. All I could see was the outline of an eye looking through the peephole. Heather didn't even ask me what I saw. She pulled out her phone from her pocket and began dialing 911. As soon as she connected with the operator, we heard scratching and banging coming from the door. It was that man. He was trying to break down the door. We were so scared and didn't know what to do. The operator instructed us to go, run, and hide, but to stay on the line. So that's exactly what we did. We hid inside my bathroom and inside the bathtub, seeming that that's the only room in my house with a lock. We sat there for what felt like years when we suddenly heard glass shattering from downstairs. Me and Heather started to cry. We thought we were going to die. We heard distant giggles of what sounded like 3 men. We lost even more hope. Then, out of nowhere, we heard stomping and laughing coming from the stairs. They were running up the stairs, trying their hardest to find us. And then the doorknob jiggled. I told the operator in my quietest voice that they were by the door and trying to get in. The operator informed me the police would be there in 2 minutes. Once the knob jiggled and the door didn't open, we both heard muffled laughter coming from the other side of the door. We heard heavy objects being thrown at the door, heavy bangs and laughter. Finally, we heard sirens. All of our dread and despair slowly drifted away, and we thought we were safe. Until the door broke down. The men flooded the room. There were 3 in total, all wearing plague doctor masks you would see in those scary stories. We let out the loudest scream we've ever had leave our bodies. They grabbed us by our hair and started laughing uncontrollably. We heard my front door being kicked down and many heavy footsteps coming from the stairs approaching where we both were. It was the police. The 3 men began fake crying and dropped us back in the bathtub. It was almost like a cartoonish cry, like it wasn't real sounding. It disturbed me greatly. The police entered the room and handcuffed the men. They didn't put up a fight. They escorted us outside to wait for our parents' arrival. Heather's parents came first and began hugging her, crying, having regrets on letting her stay with me. They gave me a dirty look, thinking all this was my fault. Then I saw my parents' car. They ran to me and I started bawling my eyes out. I was so happy to see them. It's 2 years later, and I have yet to hear what happened to the men that invaded my house that night. Me and Heather are no longer friends. Her parents made us cut ties after that night, which made me very upset and almost more sad than the break-in. I haven't seen her in years, and writing this story is the first time I've thought of her in a while. Parents, never leave your kids home alone, no matter what, because one day this might happen to them, and they might not be so lucky. Protect them at all costs.